told me I have too much expression in my dancing. I might want to think about acting.
Shirley MacLaine never learned how to disappear. Not as a child, not as a woman, not even when the world expected her to. In Hollywood, women are often taught to shrink, to soften their voices, dull their edges, smile through discomfort, and pretend ambition is something accidental. Shirley MacLaine did none of that. From the very beginning, she stood upright in a system that preferred women bend. To millions, she was funny, sharp, fearless. To critics, she was difficult, outspoken, unconventional. To herself, she was always asking the same question, quietly, persistently, relentlessly. Who am I when no one is watching? Her face became familiar across generations, her voice unmistakable, her presence impossible to ignore. In films like The Apartment and Terms of Endearment, she gave audiences something rare. She didn't perform emotion, she revealed it. Raw, inconvenient, unpolished. She played women who said what others were afraid to think, women who loved deeply, lost painfully, and survived without asking permission. But while her characters found closure on screen, Shirley's real life never followed neat endings. She lived decades under bright lights, yet often walked home alone. Fame gave her power, but it also stripped her of privacy, certainty, and sometimes even belonging. She was applauded for her honesty, then punished for it, celebrated for her talent, then criticized for refusing to fit neatly into expectation. Hollywood loves women when they are agreeable. It tolerates them when they are talented. It fears them when they are honest. Shirley MacLaine was all three. She spoke openly about independence when women were expected to define themselves by marriage. She explored spirituality when it was easier to pretend certainty. She admitted loneliness when success was supposed to be enough. She questioned reality itself while standing at the center of one of the most manufactured industries in the world. And that made people uncomfortable. Because Shirley MacLaine did not sell fantasy, she sold truth. And truth has consequences. She won awards. She stood on the world's biggest stages. She accepted applause that echoed across decades. But applause fades quickly. What remains are the quiet moments afterward, the hotel rooms, the long flights, the late-night thoughts fame cannot silence. What happens when independence becomes your identity, but connection remains elusive? What does success feel like when it doesn't answer the questions you hoped it would? How do you age in an industry that worships youth when you have never apologized for existing? Shirley MacLaine aged in public, without disguise. She refused to pretend time was not passing. She allowed her face to change, her voice to deepen, her roles to grow heavier, more complicated, more human. She did not chase youth, she chased understanding. And still, people misunderstood her. Some saw arrogance where there was curiosity. Some saw defiance where there was self-respect. Some saw isolation where there was independence. But beneath all the labels was a woman who felt deeply, who questioned endlessly, who never stopped searching for meaning beyond applause, beyond romance, beyond approval. She was not interested in being liked. She was interested in being real. That choice came with a cost. A lifetime of headlines, a lifetime of judgment, a lifetime of both admired and alone. And yet, she never retreated. At 91, Shirley MacLaine remains standing, still curious, still sharp, still refusing to explain herself to a world that never fully understood her. Her life is not a fairy tale. It is something braver. It is a life lived out loud. This is not the story of a woman who fit in. This is the story of a woman who refused to. This is not a celebration of fame. It is an examination of its weight. This is the life of Shirley MacLaine, uncompromising, searching, human. And it begins long before the spotlight found her. Early life and family background. Shirley MacLaine was born Shirley MacLaine Beatty on April 24, 1934, in Richmond, Virginia, far from the glamour and noise that would later surround her name. Her childhood did not begin with applause or promise. It began with structure, expectation, and a quiet sense that love was something earned, not given freely. Her father, Ira Owens Beatty, was a psychology professor, thoughtful, intellectual, emotionally reserved. He believed in reason, restraint, and discipline. Her mother, Kathleen MacLaine, was a drama teacher, expressive, ambitious, deeply invested in performance and social standing. Between them, Shirley grew up suspended between logic and imagination, analysis and emotion. Their household was not unkind, but it was demanding. Achievement mattered, reputation mattered, control mattered. Praise was measured, affection was subtle. Shirley learned early that approval was conditional, and self-expression came with rules attached. She was raised alongside her younger brother, Warren Beatty, who would later become one of Hollywood's most famous leading men. Even as children, the contrast between them was apparent. Warren was charismatic, confident, effortlessly charming. Shirley was observant, internal, sharper around the edges. Where he moved easily through attention, she studied it. From a young age, Shirley was placed into ballet classes, not because she asked for them, but because her mother believed discipline would mold her. Ballet became her first language of survival. Long hours, pain disguised as grace, perfection demanded without explanation, mistakes punished by silence rather than anger. She was told repeatedly that she was awkward, that she lacked the physical beauty expected of dancers. Her feet were too big, her body too stiff. Yet she persisted, not because she believed she would succeed, but because quitting felt worse than failing. Those years taught her something she would carry for life. Love could be withheld, approval could be delayed, but endurance was power. Emotion was not openly discussed in the Beatty household. Feelings were something to manage quietly. Shirley learned to watch people closely, reading tone, posture, pauses. She became sensitive to emotional undercurrents others ignored. That awareness would later define her acting, but at the time it simply made her feel different. She attended schools where she never quite fit. Too outspoken for some, too inward for others. She questioned authority instinctively, even when she obeyed it outwardly. Inside, she was already resisting roles she had not yet been asked to play. Her mother encouraged performance, but not vulnerability. Appear well, speak clearly, impress. Shirley absorbed this message while quietly sensing something missing. She longed for permission to be uncertain, emotional, unpolished. That permission never came. Instead, she grew up fast. By her teenage years, Shirley was already wrestling with questions most adults avoided. What does success mean if it costs authenticity? Who am I when I stop performing? What happens if I choose myself instead of expectation? These questions were never answered at home, but they were planted deeply. Her family valued achievement over comfort, discipline over tenderness, composure over confession. Shirley would spend her life unlearning those lessons while still carrying their weight. Long before fame arrived, Shirley MacLaine had already learned how to stand alone. Not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly, steadily, with a sense that her life would have to be defined on her own terms. And soon she would leave home to begin doing exactly that.
First steps, struggles. Leaving home did not feel like freedom to Shirley MacLaine. It felt like exposure. She arrived in New York City not with confidence, but with discipline drilled into her bones and a restless need to prove something she couldn't yet name. The city was loud, indifferent, and unimpressed. Talent was everywhere. Dreams were cheap. Survival was not. Shirley enrolled in theater programs and continued her ballet training, believing that hard work would eventually lead to belonging. But the reality was harsher than she expected. Ballet companies rejected her again and again. She was told she lacked the ideal body, that she was too stiff, too sharp, too much of something they couldn't define. Each rejection landed quietly. No drama, no tears in public. She learned to accept disappointment with composure, then carry it home alone. Money was tight. Opportunities were scarce. She took chorus jobs, understudy roles, anything that kept her close to the stage. At night, she replayed conversations in her mind, wondering whether she had said too much, moved too boldly, existed too loudly. In Broadway rehearsal rooms, she learned another truth. Talent alone was not enough. Timing mattered, luck mattered, being seen mattered. And being seen often required waiting in silence. Her break came not from being chosen, but from being available. In 1954, while working as an understudy in the musical The Pajama Game, fate intervened quietly. The lead actress fell ill. Shirley stepped in, not with confidence, but with readiness born of years of restraint and repetition. She performed without embellishment, without trying to impress. She simply told the truth of the role. Someone important was watching. Hollywood scouts noticed her not because she dazzled, but because she felt real. Untrained in glamour, unpolished in charm, she brought something unexpected to the stage: authenticity, intelligence, presence without pleading. But early success did not erase insecurity. Studio screen tests were brutal. Executives criticized her looks, her voice, her posture. She was told she wasn't beautiful enough, that she was too sharp for romance, too strange to be easily sold. She listened, then she kept going. Every audition became an exercise in restraint. Don't ask, don't beg, don't apologize. Shirley learned to stand in rooms full of judgment without shrinking. She learned that rejection did not always mean failure. Sometimes it meant resistance. When Paramount Pictures finally offered her a contract, it felt less like victory and more like permission to continue. Hollywood did not promise safety. It promised exposure. She entered the studio system knowing she would be shaped, tested, and measured. But she also carried something few others did: a deep understanding of endurance, a familiarity with silence, a comfort with being misunderstood. She had not arrived to be adored. She had arrived to survive. And in that survival, something rare was forming. A voice that would not soften, a presence that would not disappear, a woman learning, slowly and painfully, how to trust herself
without approval. Shirley MacLaine's career did not begin with applause. It began with waiting, with doubt, with the courage to keep standing when no one was clapping. And soon, the world would notice.
Breakthrough moment. There was no grand announcement, no dramatic unveiling, no sudden transformation. Shirley MacLaine's breakthrough arrived the way many real turning points do, quietly, almost accidentally, at the intersection of timing and preparedness. In the mid-1950s, Hollywood was still obsessed with polish. Actresses were molded into fantasies, smoothed into types, trained to smile before they spoke. Shirley did not fit easily into that vision. She wasn't trying to. After being noticed on Broadway in The Pajama Game, Paramount Pictures offered her a screen test. Executives were unsure what to do with her. She was expressive but restrained, intelligent but emotionally open. She didn't project innocence, and she didn't pretend mystery. She simply existed, fully, unapologetically. That presence became her advantage. Her first major film role came in 1955 with Alfred Hitchcock's The Trouble with Harry. Hitchcock, known for his control and precision, saw something in Shirley that others missed. She brought a natural rhythm to the screen, a sense of lived-in truth that could not be taught. Opposite seasoned actors, she didn't compete. She listened. She responded. She trusted the silence between words. Critics noticed. But it was not the film itself that changed everything. It was the reaction to her. Reviewers spoke of her freshness, her intelligence, her refusal to perform femininity in expected ways. Audiences sensed it too. This was not a star asking for attention. This was a woman offering honesty. Then Some Came Running in 1958. In the role of Ginny Moorhead, Shirley portrayed a character brimming with vulnerability, loneliness, and emotional hunger. Ginny was not glamorous. She was raw. She wanted love too openly. She needed too deeply. In another era, the character might have been dismissed. Shirley made her unforgettable. Her performance earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. For the first time, Hollywood stopped asking whether Shirley could fit in. They began asking where she could lead. The nomination changed the tone of every conversation. Studios no longer spoke to her with uncertainty. They spoke with curiosity. Directors saw her as an actress rather than a type. Roles began to arrive that allowed complexity rather than conformity. But Shirley did not celebrate the moment the way others might have. She did not rush to define herself by success. She understood how fragile approval could be. She had lived long enough with rejection to know that praise, too, could disappear. What mattered more than recognition was control. She began choosing roles that challenged expectations, women who were difficult, outspoken, emotionally exposed, characters who resisted neat endings. In doing so, she quietly began reshaping what leading women could be allowed to feel on screen. This breakthrough did not make her famous overnight. It made her respected. And in Hollywood, respect was rarer than stardom. Shirley MacLaine had crossed an invisible line, from potential to presence, from hopeful to undeniable. Not because she changed who she was, but because she refused to. The world was finally catching up to what she had always known. She belonged.
Peak career and achievements. By the early 1960s, Shirley MacLaine was no longer arriving in Hollywood. She was shaping it. Her peak did not look like a single moment or a single role. It unfolded across years of deliberate choices, quiet rebellions, and performances that refused simplicity. While many actresses were boxed into narrow definitions of desirability, Shirley expanded the frame, proving that wit, intelligence, and emotional honesty could carry a film just as powerfully as beauty. In 1960, The Apartment became a defining chapter, not just for Shirley, but for American cinema. Her portrayal of Fran Kubelik was layered with gentleness and pain, humor and quiet despair. Fran was a woman overlooked, taken for granted, yet aching for dignity. Shirley did not play her as a victim. She played her as a person still standing. The film won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Shirley received another nomination, but more importantly, she earned something harder to measure: trust. Directors trusted her to carry complexity. Audiences trusted her to tell the truth. What followed was a golden era marked by range rather than repetition. In Irma la Douce, she balanced comedy and vulnerability. In Sweet Charity, she danced through optimism while letting heartbreak bleed through every smile. Even when characters were larger than life, Shirley grounded them in emotional reality. She never chased perfection, she chased authenticity. During a time when Hollywood expected women to soften themselves with age, Shirley did the opposite. She grew sharper, more outspoken, more selective. She demanded roles that reflected adult women's inner lives, their contradictions, their regrets, their courage. By the 1970s, her influence extended beyond acting. She became known as a thinker, a challenger of convention, a woman unafraid to question the systems around her. That independence sometimes made her difficult in the eyes of studios. Shirley accepted that price willingly. Then came Terms of Endearment in 1983. As Aurora Greenway, Shirley delivered one of the most emotionally layered performances of her career. Aurora was proud, flawed, fierce, loving, selfish, and deeply human. The role allowed Shirley to age on screen without apology. She did not diminish with time, she deepened. The Academy Award for Best Actress followed, her first and only Oscar win after multiple nominations. It arrived not as validation, but as acknowledgement of decades of commitment to truth in performance. Yet even at the height of recognition, Shirley resisted the idea of a summit. She did not believe in peaks that signaled arrival. She believed in evolution. Every role was another conversation with herself, another chance to explore what it meant to be alive, uncertain and searching. Her achievements were not measured only by awards or box office success. They lived in the doors she opened, for actresses to be sharp instead of sweet, aging instead of fading, honest instead of agreeable. Shirley MacLaine's peak was not a place she stood, it was a path she kept walking. And with every step, she reminded Hollywood that success did not require surrender. It required courage.
Personal life and challenges. Behind Shirley MacLaine's confidence on screen lived a woman who never fit easily into the roles life tried to assign her. Her personal life was shaped by the same fierce independence that defined her career. She married producer Steve Parker in 1954, at a time when Hollywood expected actresses to balance ambition with quiet domesticity. But Shirley was never designed for quiet. The marriage endured nearly 3 decades, long on paper, distant in reality. They lived largely separate lives, sometimes on separate continents, bound more by understanding than intimacy. Motherhood came once, with the birth of her daughter, Sachi. Shirley loved her deeply, but even this relationship carried complexity.
Her demanding career, her constant searching, and her refusal to live conventionally created emotional distance that would later surface painfully in public discussions. Shirley never pretended she had mastered the balance between work, self, and family. She admitted her flaws, even when honesty made her vulnerable to judgment. Romantic fulfillment often eluded her. Love, when it appeared, was complicated by her need for freedom. Shirley did not believe in surrendering herself to be accepted. That choice protected her spirit, but also cost her closeness. Loneliness visited often, even during years when her name was everywhere. As fame grew, so did misunderstanding. Shirley's curiosity extended beyond acting into spirituality, philosophy, and the nature of human existence. She explored ideas that many found unconventional, speaking openly about meditation, reincarnation, and the search for meaning beyond material success. To some, this made her eccentric. To others, it made her brave. Shirley accepted both reactions without apology. The pressure of being outspoken in a conservative industry was heavy. Hollywood preferred its stars agreeable and predictable. Shirley was neither. She challenged gender expectations, questioned power structures, and refused to soften her opinions for public comfort. That independence sometimes isolated her professionally and personally. Health struggles also entered quietly. Injuries from her early dancing training lingered. Exhaustion followed years of relentless work. Aging, though embraced intellectually, still carried physical reminders of time's passage. Shirley did not hide these realities, but she did not dramatize them either. She treated pain as another truth to acknowledge, not a weakness to conceal. Perhaps the deepest challenge was internal. Shirley spent much of her life searching for understanding of herself, of love, of why success never fully erased emptiness. She spoke often of longing, of questions that had no simple answers. Fame amplified those questions rather than silencing them. Behind the spotlight lived a woman both strong and uncertain, celebrated and misunderstood. Shirley MacLaine's challenges were not scandals splashed across headlines. They were quieter battles, with distance, with doubt, with the price of choosing herself, in a world that often punishes women for doing exactly that. Her life off-screen was not a contradiction to her success. It was the cost of it, and she paid it honestly.
Later years decline. As Shirley MacLaine grew older, something in her life began to shift. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but with the quiet certainty of time doing what it always does. The industry that once relied on her fire and fearlessness began to move on, chasing younger faces and faster stories. Hollywood has never known how to age its women gently, and Shirley understood this better than most. The roles changed. They became fewer, more reflective, often carrying the weight of memory rather than momentum. She no longer needed to prove herself, yet the absence of constant work still carried its own kind of ache. For someone who had spent decades moving, creating, questioning, the stillness could feel unfamiliar, even unsettling. Her body, once trained to discipline and endurance, began to speak more loudly. Old injuries resurfaced. Fatigue lingered longer than it used to. Aging was not something Shirley feared, but it demanded negotiation. She faced it with honesty, refusing to pretend that time had not altered her strength, even as it deepened her insight. Public perception shifted as well. To newer generations, Shirley became less a living presence and more a symbol, an icon spoken of in past tense. Interviews focused increasingly on reflection rather than ambition. She was asked to look back, to explain herself, to summarize a life that could never truly be reduced to neat conclusions. There were moments of loneliness. Friends and contemporaries faded away, one by one. The industry she had challenged and reshaped felt quieter, less personal. Applause turned into memory. Invitations slowed. The world moved forward without asking if she was ready. Yet decline for Shirley was never surrender. She remained outspoken, curious, unfiltered. She wrote, lectured, and continued exploring the questions that had followed her since youth. While others softened with age, Shirley stayed sharp. She spoke about death without fear, about aging without shame, about solitude without bitterness. If anything, time stripped away any remaining need for approval. There were no public scandals, no tragic collapse, no dramatic disappearance. Shirley simply stepped into a different kind of existence, one less visible but more intentional. She lived on her own terms to the end, refusing to edit herself for relevance. The contrast was striking. A woman who once filled movie screens now occupied quieter spaces. A star who once defined eras now reflected on them. Fame dimmed, but identity did not. In these later years, Shirley MacLaine became something rare in Hollywood. Not a cautionary tale, not a forgotten figure, but a living reminder that a woman's worth does not expire when the spotlight moves on. Her decline was not a fall. It was a narrowing of noise, a life distilled down to its truest shape. And in that quiet, Shirley remained exactly who she had always been.
Legacy and symbolism. Shirley MacLaine's legacy cannot be measured by awards alone, though there were many, nor by box office numbers, though she helped define some of cinema's most enduring moments. Her legacy lives in something less tangible and far more lasting. She changed what it meant to be a woman who refuses to shrink. Long before Hollywood learned the language of authenticity, Shirley spoke it fluently. She played women who were sharp, complicated, defiant, vulnerable, sometimes unlikable, and always real. At a time when female characters were expected to soften themselves for approval, Shirley allowed hers to be difficult, restless, and unapologetically human. That courage quietly reshaped the stories Hollywood dared to tell. She became a symbol of independence in an industry built on conformity. Shirley never belonged to anyone's fantasy. She challenged studio executives, questioned directors, and refused to be packaged into a single image. Where others were taught to please, she insisted on truth. That insistence opened doors for women who followed, women who would later be praised for their honesty without always realizing who made that honesty possible. Her influence stretches beyond film. Shirley represented the freedom to evolve publicly. She allowed herself to change her beliefs, her interests, her priorities, even when those changes invited criticism or ridicule. She proved that growth does not require permission and that curiosity is not something to outgrow. To many, she became a symbol of resilience, not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet endurance of someone who keeps asking questions long after the applause fades. She showed that a meaningful life is not built solely on success, but on the courage to live without editing oneself. Shirley also symbolizes something rare in Hollywood history: longevity without disappearance. She did not vanish when youth passed, nor did she cling desperately to relevance. She stayed present, thoughtful, and engaged with the world on her own terms. That alone became a powerful lesson in dignity. For audiences, she remains unforgettable. For actresses, she remains essential. Her work continues to speak to those who feel restless in small expectations, to women who sense that their lives are larger than the roles assigned to them. Shirley MacLaine's legacy is not one of perfection, it is one of permission. Permission to age, permission to question, permission to live boldly, imperfectly, and honestly. In the end, she did not just leave behind films, she left behind freedom. Closing statement. Shirley MacLaine's story is a testament to a life lived on her own terms, an extraordinary journey through Hollywood's glittering illusions and its hidden shadows. From the restless curiosity of a young girl who dared to dream beyond the expectations of her small-town upbringing, to the bold, uncompromising actress who reshaped the image of women on screen, Shirley's life embodies the tension between desire and discipline, ambition and authenticity, fame and the pursuit of personal truth. She taught the world that success is not measured by how much attention one receives, but by how faithfully one follows the self. Shirley never surrendered her individuality, never allowed the machinery of Hollywood to dictate her worth, and never let the applause define her identity. She embraced both triumphs and failures as necessary chapters of a larger story, finding wisdom in struggle, humor in pain, and courage in vulnerability. Even as the spotlight faded, Shirley's presence never dimmed. Her later years were quieter, reflective, yet no less purposeful. She continued to write, speak, and explore, showing that life's meaning is not reserved for the young or the famous, but for those brave enough to remain curious, honest, and alive to every moment. In the ebb and flow of stardom, she discovered the ultimate freedom, the freedom to be wholly, unabashedly herself. Shirley MacLaine's legacy reminds us that legends are not simply immortalized through their accolades or their fame. They are immortalized through the integrity of their journey, the courage to defy expectations, and the strength to live honestly in a world determined to label and contain them. She showed that it is possible to hold grace and rebellion in equal measure, to balance ambition with authenticity, and to age with dignity while remaining endlessly human. Her story is not just a biography of an actress, it is a meditation on the cost and beauty of independence, the rewards of fearlessness, and the quiet heroism of choosing your own path. Shirley MacLaine's life whispers to every dreamer who feels constrained by circumstance or expectation, saying, "Dare to ask, dare to act, dare to live fully." In the end, Shirley MacLaine's narrative is not merely about movies, awards, or celebrity. It is about the relentless pursuit of self. It is about a woman who refused to conform, who embraced life's contradictions, and who, through her courage and brilliance, continues to inspire generations. Her story stands as a timeless reminder that true greatness is measured not in applause, but in authenticity.